The Dominion had ruled 17 conquered species across 3 star systems for over 1,000 years. They were tall creatures with skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were black and cold like deep space itself. They believed themselves to be the masters of all living things. Commander stood on the bridge of his harvester vessel called the Crimson Tide and watched the human ship appear on his sensors. He felt nothing but mild curiosity. The humans were new to space travel. They had only been moving between stars for about 100 years. They were like insects waiting to be collected and studied. The human ship was called the Wandering Star. It was a colony transport carrying families to a new world called New Kansas, where they planned to build farms and homes and start fresh lives. There were 300 people aboard, including 47 children. The youngest was only 4 years old. The oldest was 16. They had been traveling for 3 months and were only 2 days away from their new home when they found them. Jake was the security chief on the Wandering Star. He was 34 years old with brown hair and tired eyes. He had served in the Earth military for 10 years before taking this quieter job protecting colonists. His wife worked as a teacher on the ship. Their daughter Emma was 8 years old and had her mother's smile and her father's stubborn spirit. When the alarm started screaming through the ship, Jake kissed his wife and daughter and told them to hide in the cargo bay with the other families. Then he grabbed his rifle and went to fight. The boarding parties came through the airlocks like a flood of death. They carried weapons that fired bolts of burning energy. They wore armor that could stop most human bullets, but Jake and his security team fought anyway. They set up barriers in the corridors. They used every trick they knew. Jake personally killed 9 soldiers before one of them hit him with a stun blast that dropped him to the floor. As his vision faded, he heard screaming coming from the cargo bay. Commander walked through the human ship and examined the captured colonists with scientific interest. The adults had been gathered in the main hold. Many were injured. Some were crying. But what caught his attention was the way they kept looking toward another group of captives. The children had been separated and were being held in a corner under heavy guard. The adult humans seemed almost insane with worry. They kept calling out names. They kept trying to push toward the children, even though the guards shocked them back. Had studied many species, but he had never seen behavior quite like this. Among the children were raised in collective facilities from birth. Parents had no special connection to their offspring. The young were simply future workers to be trained and assigned. But these humans acted as if the children were more valuable than their own lives. Mothers stood in front of their young and refused to move even when weapons were pointed at them. Fathers fought with bare hands against armed soldiers. It was fascinating in a primitive sort of way. Held Emma tight against her chest and whispered that everything would be okay. She did not believe her own words, but she said them anyway because that is what mothers do. When the soldiers came toward them, pushed Emma behind her back and stood firm. A soldier grabbed her arm and threw her aside like she weighed nothing. Another soldier picked up Emma, who screamed and kicked and bit. Jake had regained consciousness by then. He was on his knees with his hands bound behind his back. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. He watched a soldier carry his screaming daughter toward a transport pod. Something broke inside him in that moment. Not his spirit. His spirit hardened into something cold and sharp and permanent. He looked directly at Commander, who was observing the scene with those empty black eyes. "You have no idea what you have just started," Jake said. His voice was quiet, but every human in that hold heard him. "But you will." Made a gesture that might have been amusement. He had heard threats from conquered species before. None of them had ever mattered. The Dominion had crushed rebellions from races far more powerful than these soft pink creatures. He ordered his soldiers to finish loading the specimens. The children were taken to the Crimson Tide and placed in small cells designed for biological samples. The cells had force fields instead of bars. There was a hard bench for sleeping and a small drain in the corner for waste. The children could see each other through the transparent walls but could not touch or comfort one another. Some of the older ones tried to calm the younger ones. A 12-year-old boy named Danny moved to the edge of his cell and pressed his hand against the force field. A 7-year-old girl named Sophie in the next cell did the same. The energy barrier hummed between their palms, but they stayed like that anyway. Emma did not cry. She sat in the corner of her cell and hugged her knees to her chest and thought about what her father had told her many times. He always said that humans never give up. He said that no matter how dark things got, help would come. She believed him. She had to believe him, because the alternative was too terrible to consider. The adult humans from the wandering star were loaded onto a different ship bound for labor camps on the far side of space. Jake and were separated during the transfer. The last thing Jake saw was his wife being pushed into a transport pod. She was looking back at him and he could read her lips. She was saying Emma's name over and over. Commander filed his report as the Crimson Tide jumped into faster-than-light travel. He described the capture as routine. He noted the unusual attachment humans displayed toward their young and suggested it might be a weakness worth exploiting. He recommended that the children be studied extensively and perhaps trained as loyal servants. Young minds were easier to reshape than old ones. He had no way of knowing that his report would be intercepted by human intelligence within hours. He had no way of knowing that Emma's face would appear on every screen in human space by the next morning. He had no way of knowing that he had just made the worst mistake in the history of his species. Somewhere far away, a grandmother looked at that little girl's face and felt something ancient stir in her heart. A factory worker put down his tools and walked out without a word. A retired soldier opened a closet he had not touched in 20 years and pulled out his old uniform. The humans were coming, and they would not be asking politely. Admiral Cole had served in the United Earth Defense Force for 40 years. She had hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much war. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belts. She had negotiated peace treaties with 3 alien species. She had buried friends and enemies alike. At 62 years old, she thought she understood the universe. Then she watched the footage from the wandering star and realized she had never truly known rage until that moment. The distress beacon had reached Earth 6 hours after the attack. It contained video from the ship's internal cameras. Watched a mother being beaten as soldiers dragged away her crying son. She watched a father shot in the chest for trying to protect his daughters. She watched Emma reach through the bars of a containment unit, her small fingers stretching toward her mother who was being dragged away screaming. Had 3, they lived on Mars with her daughter. The oldest was 9 years old, almost the same age as Emma. She looked at that footage and saw her own faces. She opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council. This was the governing body of known space, a collection of representatives from 47 different species who made laws and settled disputes. There were members in good standing. Humanity had joined only 20 years ago and was still considered a minor species with little influence. Ambassador of the collective answered her call. They were an insect-like species with compound eyes and mandibles instead of mouths. They had been spacefaring for 10,000 years and viewed younger species with something between patience and contempt. Admiral Cole said in his clicking voice, "How may the Council assist humanity today?" Ambassador, I am formally notifying the Council that the Dominion has committed an act of war against my species. They attacked a civilian vessel. They killed 17 people, including 2 children. They have taken 47 children prisoner along with over 200 adults. I am demanding their immediate return. Made a sound that his translation device rendered as a sigh. We have reviewed the incident, Admiral. While the loss of life is regrettable, they have operated within their legal rights. The Dominion Charter permits them to harvest specimens from species not protected by Council treaties. Humanity's treaty does not specifically prohibit such actions. They took children, said. Young specimens, yes. The fine juvenile subjects more useful for biological study. This is standard practice. They have done the same with 17 other species. And the Council allowed this. The Council does not interfere with internal Dominion matters. I suggest you file a formal protest and wait for arbitration. These processes typically take between 2 and 5 standard years. Leaned forward in her chair, her voice dropped low and cold. Let me be very clear, Ambassador. You have 48 standard hours to secure the release of those children unharmed. After that deadline passes, there will be no negotiation. There will be no arbitration. There will be no formal protests. There will only be consequences. His compound eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. Admiral, I understand that human attachment to offspring is unusually strong. Your species is known for this emotional tendency. However, you must recognize the reality of your situation. The Dominion commands a fleet of 12,000 warships. Your species has perhaps 300 combat-capable vessels. Surely even humans can understand basic mathematics. 48 hours, repeated. Admiral Cole, if humanity attacks the Dominion, you will be destroyed. The Council will not intervene on your behalf. You will have brought extinction upon your own species over 47 specimens. Is that truly what you want? Smiled. It was not a nice smile. Ambassador, you have been in space for 10,000 years. You have forgotten something that humans still remember. We remember what it means to be prey. We remember what it means to watch our children be taken by predators. And we remember what we did to those predators. She leaned closer to the screen. We hunted them. We hunted every single predator that threatened our young until they were extinct or fled from us in terror. We did this with rocks and sticks when that was all we had. Imagine what we will do now that we have starships. The channel closed. Within 1 hour, this conversation was leaked to every human colony in known space. Nobody ever discovered who leaked it. Perhaps it was herself. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. On Earth, factories that had been producing consumer goods switched to weapons manufacturing without being ordered to do so. Workers volunteered for double shifts. Retirement home residents with military experience began calling old friends. A 90-year-old former pilot named George showed up at a recruiting station and demanded to be useful. On Mars, the colonial militia began loading their ships with every weapon they could find. The governor tried to remind them that they had no authorization for military action. They ignored her. She stopped trying to stop them and instead ordered the government armory opened. On the mining stations in the asteroid belt, crews welded armor plating onto their industrial vessels. These ships were never designed for combat. They were designed to break apart rocks and harvest minerals, but their crews did not care. The ships had engines and they had power, and that was enough. On a small farming colony called New Hope, a woman named stood in front of a crowd of 300 volunteers. Her own children were grown and safe, but she remembered what it felt like to hold them when they were small. They put children in cages, she said, her voice carried across the silent crowd. Human children, our children. I do not care if we win this fight. I do not care if we die. I only care that those monsters learn what happens when you cage human children. The crowd roared its agreement. Across human space, ships began moving toward a single point. Commercial freighters abandoned their cargo routes. Passenger liners evacuated their travelers and headed for the rendezvous. Private yachts owned by wealthy citizens burned through fuel reserves that cost fortunes to replace. Nobody complained. Nobody hesitated. The children's faces were everywhere. Their names were spoken like prayers. Emma, Danny, Sophie, Maria, 47 names that had become more important than anything else in the universe. Ambassador sent a message to Commander warning him that the humans seemed genuinely angry, read the message and deleted it. He had seen angry species before. Anger faded. Mathematics did not. He was about to learn that human mathematics worked differently than anyone expected. Had been flying cargo ships for 15 years. He was 41 years old with a beard that needed trimming and hands that knew every switch and lever on his ship by feel alone. His vessel was called the Lucky Break. She was older than he was and held together by replacement parts and stubborn hope. Her hull had been patched so many times that sometimes joked she was more patched than hull. He loved that ship like some men love their dogs. His wife worked as his co-pilot and chief mechanic. They had been married for 12 years and had flown together for 10 of those years. They had no children of their own. They had tried for years, but it never happened. They had made peace with it eventually. The ship became their child instead. When the news came about the wandering star was hauling grain between two farming colonies, he stopped his ship in the middle of empty space and read the report 3 times. Came onto the bridge and found him sitting very still with tears running down his face. She asked. "They put kids in cages," he said. His voice sounded strange even to himself. "Little kids. Some of them are only 4 years old. They just took them and put them in cages like animals." Read the report over his shoulder. She did not cry. She just got very quiet and then walked to the navigation console and started plotting a course. "What are you doing?" asked. "Same thing you were about to do," she answered. "We are going to the rendezvous point. The Lucky Break is not a warship. We do not have weapons. We do not have armor. We would be useless in a fight." Turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard. "Then we will ram them. We will fly this old ship right into the biggest vessel we can find, and we will make them pay for every single child they took. Those could have been our children if things had been different. Those are our children, all of them. They belong to all of us." Nodded slowly. He took over the navigation controls and adjusted their course. The Lucky Break turned away from her scheduled route and headed toward the gathering fleet. Behind them, their cargo of grain floated abandoned in space. It did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered except those 47 children. The rendezvous point was at the edge of space, just outside the range of their defense sensors. When the Lucky Break arrived, could not believe what he saw. Ships filled the space around them like stars in a dense nebula. Big ships and small ships. Military vessels with their weapons charged and civilian craft with improvised armor welded to their hulls. Thousands of vessels had gathered in just 30 hours. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of her flagship, the carrier Indomitable, and watched the fleet assemble. She had expected maybe 500 ships. She had received over 4,000. They were still arriving. Every few minutes, another ship would drop out of faster-than-light travel and take up position in the formation. A communications officer approached her. "Admiral, we are receiving requests for assignment from the civilian vessels. Many of them have no combat training. They are asking where they should position themselves. Tell them to form up behind the main battle line. If they have any weapons at all, they can provide supporting fire. If they do not have weapons, tell them to stand by for rescue operations. Admiral, some of them are asking to be placed on the front line. They know they will likely be destroyed, but they want to be useful." Closed her eyes for a moment. These people had left everything behind. They had abandoned their jobs and their homes and their safe lives because human children were in danger. They knew they might die. They came anyway. "Tell them I am proud of them," she said. "Tell them humanity is proud of them. Then put them wherever they want to go. They have earned the right to choose." The Galactic Council sent 17 messages demanding that the human fleet disperse. Ignored all of them. Ambassador threatened that attacking the Dominion would result in humanity being expelled from the Council and labeled as a hostile species. Sent back a single word: good. Commander received reports about the human fleet and felt his first moment of uncertainty. He had expected a response, perhaps 100 ships, a gesture of defiance that could be easily crushed. 4,000 ships was something else entirely. Where had they all come from? The humans were supposed to have only 300 military vessels. His intelligence officers explained that the rest were civilian craft, cargo ships, mining vessels, passenger liners, relaxed. These were not warships. They were targets. His fleet of 8,000 trained warships would cut through them like a blade through water. He prepared his defensive formation around Prime, the of the Dominion. The children were being held in a research facility on the planet's surface. He positioned his ships to create an impenetrable wall between the humans and their objective. Let them come. Let them break themselves against might. It would be a lesson the galaxy would remember. On the Indomitable received a final communication from Earth. It was a video message recorded by the parents of the captured children. Jake was not among them. He was still in a labor camp somewhere in space, but had escaped somehow. She looked into the camera with eyes red from crying but a voice steady as steel. Admiral Cole said, "My daughter Emma is 8 years old. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She laughs too loud and asks too many questions, and she is afraid of the dark. Please bring her home. Please bring all of them home. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, bring our children home." Played that message on every ship in the fleet. 4,000 crews listened to a mother beg for her daughter. 4,000 crews heard the names and ages and favorite things of 47 children who were waiting to be rescued. Then opened a channel to Commander. Her message was simple. "Return our children. You have 6 hours. This is not a request." Replied with a detailed description of the experiments he planned to conduct on the children if the humans attacked. He thought this would make them hesitate. He thought fear for the children's safety would force them to negotiate. He had fundamentally misunderstood what he was dealing with. The humans were not coming to negotiate. They were coming to demonstrate what happens when predators touch their young. 6 hours later, the largest battle in galactic history began. The Battle of Prime began at exactly noon Standard Earth time. Admiral Cole gave the order, and 4,000 human vessels surged forward into the waiting guns of the Dominion fleet. They had 8,000 warships arranged in perfect defensive formation. They had superior firepower, superior technology, and centuries of combat experience. They expected an easy victory. They were wrong. The first wave of human ships was made up entirely of volunteers from the civilian fleet. These were cargo haulers and mining vessels and passenger craft that had been converted into weapons over the course of 2 days. They had no business fighting warships. They attacked anyway. Captain flew the lucky break directly into the heart of the formation. His old freighter shook and rattled as enemy fire splashed against the improvised armor plates his wife had welded to the hull. Warning lights flashed across his console. Hull breaches appeared on the damage display like spreading wounds. Sat beside him working the controls of a mining laser that had been repurposed as a weapon. The laser was designed to cut through asteroids. It worked just as well on armor. She fired again and again, scoring burning lines across the hull of a Dominion cruiser. "We are taking too much damage," she said. "We need to pull back." "No," he answered. "Look at the tactical display. The Relentless is trapped. If we pull back, they die." The destroyer Relentless was one of the military vessels leading the assault. She had pushed too deep into enemy lines, and now 3 battlecruisers were closing in on her. Her weapons were still firing, but her engines were damaged, and she could not escape. Push the lucky break forward. His ship was burning in 3 places. His shields had failed 10 minutes ago. He flew anyway. He said quietly, "I love you." "I know," she answered. "I love you too. Now shut up and fly." The lucky break put herself between the Relentless and the incoming torpedo spread. There was no time to dodge, no way to survive, and held hands as the torpedoes struck. The explosion lit up the battlefield. The lucky break ceased to exist in a flash of white fire, but the torpedoes were gone. The Relentless was safe. Her crew watched their saviors die and screamed vengeance as they turned their guns on the nearest enemy ship. This scene repeated itself across the battlefield. Civilian ships threw themselves in front of military vessels. Crews sacrificed themselves to buy seconds of time for others. A passenger liner named the Morning Star deliberately rammed a carrier, her captain singing an old Earth War song as the ships collided and exploded together. Commander watched from the bridge of his command vessel and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. These humans were not fighting like any species he had encountered. They were not trying to win. They were trying to hurt. They accepted death so readily that his crews began to hesitate. How do you fight an enemy that is not afraid to die? The military ships hit the lines like a hammer. Captain Daniel Park of the destroyer, Relentless, led a charge through the center of the enemy formation. His ship was faster than it should have been because his engineers had removed every safety limit from the engines. They were burning out the reactor core and they did not care. Daniel took hit after hit. His bridge was on fire. Half his crew was dead. His left arm was broken in 2 places and hung useless at his side. He kept fighting. He kept giving orders. He kept his remaining weapons firing until there was nothing left to fire. A battle cruiser filled his, coming in for the killing blow. Daniel smiled with bloody teeth and gave his final order. All hands abandon ship. Engineering, overload the reactor. We are going to give these bastards something to remember. His crew evacuated in escape pods as the Relentless screamed toward the enemy battlecruiser. Daniel stayed at the helm. He guided his dying ship into the enemy vessel with the precision of a surgeon. The reactor overload triggered at the moment of impact. 2 ships died together, then a third caught in the expanding explosion, then a fourth. Daniel Park took 3 enemy battlecruisers with him into death. Lieutenant Maria Santos was a fighter pilot. She was 23 years old with short black hair and a temper that had gotten her in trouble more than once. Her squadron started the battle with 12 pilots. After 4 hours, she was the only one left. Her fighter was damaged. Her weapons were almost empty. She had been hit twice and was bleeding from cuts on her face and arms. She should have retreated to the carrier for repairs and medical attention. Instead, she spotted the command ship trying to escape the battlefield. Maria chased it. She chased it across 3 different star systems as it jumped from place to place trying to shake her. Her fuel dropped to critical levels. Her weapons ran dry. She did not stop. She could not stop. Commander was on that ship, the one who had ordered the children taken, the one who had threatened to experiment on them. She finally caught the command ship at the edge of a dead star system. It had run out of jump fuel and was drifting helpless. Maria landed her fighter on its hull and cut through an airlock with her emergency torch. She entered the ship with only a pistol that had 3 shots remaining. She found in his personal quarters. He was alone. His guards had fled when they realized the ship was being boarded. The great commander of the Harvester fleet was hiding under his desk. Maria pulled him out and put her pistol against his head. Her hands were shaking with exhaustion and rage. "The children," she said. "Where are the children?" Gave her the coordinates of the research facility on Prime. He begged for his life. He offered wealth and power and anything she wanted. Maria did not kill him. She wanted to. Every cell in her body screamed at her to pull the trigger, but she knew the children needed him as a bargaining chip. She bound his hands with wire from her flight suit and dragged him back to her damaged fighter. 11 hours after the battle began, it ended. The human fleet had lost nearly 1,500 ships. 30,000 humans had died, but the defensive fleet was shattered. Over 6,000 of their warships were destroyed or disabled. Their military power had been broken in a single day. The path to the children was open. The rescue teams were already on their way down to the planet's surface. The war was not over, but the first and most important battle had been won. Emma was coming home. Sergeant Drake was 35 years old and had been a soldier for half his life. He had fought in 3 colonial conflicts and seen things that still gave him nightmares. He thought he was prepared for anything. He was wrong. The research facility was located in the capital city of Prime. It was a building with no windows, designed to keep specimens contained and observers away, led the first rescue team through the front doors after the orbital bombardment had disabled the security systems. They moved fast through empty corridors, following the map coordinates that Commander had provided. They found the children on the fourth level down, was the first one through the door. He stopped so suddenly that the soldier behind him crashed into his back. The room was long and narrow, lined with transparent cells on both sides. Each cell was barely big enough for a human child to lie down in. There were hard benches for sleeping and drains in the corners for waste. Force fields hummed where bars should have been. And inside those cells were 47 human children looking up at the soldiers with eyes that had seen too much. Drake, who had killed enemies without hesitation and watched friends die without flinching, fell to his knees and wept. "Get them out," he managed to say through his tears. "Get them all out right now." The soldiers moved to the control panel and disabled the force fields. The children did not move at first. They had been prisoners for almost 2 weeks. Some had been subjected to medical examinations. Some had been kept in isolation. All of them had been terrified and alone and wondering if anyone would ever come for them. Emma was in the third cell on the right. She was sitting in the corner with her knees pulled up to her chest. When the force field dropped, she looked up at the soldier standing in her doorway. He was big and covered in armor and his face was wet with tears. "Are you here to take us home?" Emma asked. Her voice was small and rough from crying. Knelt down so he was at her level. "Yeah, sweetheart, we are here to take you home, all of you. Your mom and dad are waiting for you." Emma stood up on shaky legs and walked to him. She put her small arms around his armored neck and held on tight, lifted her gently and carried her out of that terrible room. One by one, the children were freed. The older ones helped the younger ones walk. A 12-year-old boy named Danny carried a 4-year-old girl named Lucy who was too weak to stand. A 7-year-old named Sophie held hands with the 2 children next to her and refused to let go even when the soldiers tried to examine them for injuries. The rescue shuttles were waiting outside the facility. Medical teams rushed forward to help. The children were wrapped in warm blankets and given water and food. Some of them started crying when they realized they were really being saved. Some of them just stared in silence, not quite believing it was real. 16 hours after the rescue, the children were brought to the medical ships of the human fleet. Jake was there. He had been rescued from the labor camp by a special operations team that had landed 3 hours after the main battle. His wife was there too. She had escaped the labor camp on her own by strangling a guard with her bare hands and stealing a shuttle. When Emma saw her parents, she ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life. Jake caught her in his arms and lifted her up and held her so tight that had to remind him that Emma still needed to breathe. They stood together as a family, crying and laughing and holding on to each other like they would never let go again. Around them, other reunions took place. Parents who had been rescued from labor camps embraced children they had feared they would never see again. Grandparents who had flown across the galaxy to be there held they had only seen in pictures. The sound of joy filled ships that had known only war and death for the past day. Admiral Cole watched from a distance. She did not cry. She had no tears left, but she felt something ease in her chest that had been tight since the moment she first saw the footage from the wandering star. 3 days later, she stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was full. Representatives from 47 species had gathered to address what they called human aggression against a sovereign power. They expected to apologize. They expected her to plead for understanding. They did not know Cole. "You called us here to discuss aggression," she began. Her voice was flat and cold. "Let me explain what we call it. We call it rescue. We call it justice. We call it the absolute minimum response when someone puts our children in cages." Ambassador rose from his seat. "They operated within established galactic law. Your unprovoked attack destroyed nearly 6,000 of their ships and crippled their military for generations. This council cannot allow a minor species to destabilize galactic order through violence. They should have returned our children when we asked politely. This is not acceptable behavior from a council member species. We demand reparations and a formal apology. Smiled. The smile made several ambassadors shift uncomfortably in their seats. Let me explain something to every species in this chamber. You see us as primitive, emotional, irrational in our attachment to our young. You are right. We are all of those things, and that is exactly why you should be absolutely terrified of us. She activated a holographic display, showing the human fleet still assembled above Prime. Today we came for 47 children. We sent 4,000 ships crewed by parents and grandparents and ordinary people who simply could not tolerate the thought of children in cages. We lost a third of those ships. 30,000 of our people died. We did not hesitate. We did not negotiate. We came through fire because there was no alternative we could live with. The chamber was silent. If any species in this galaxy ever touches a human child again, we will not send a fleet. We will send everything, every ship, every weapon, every human being capable of holding a rifle. We will not stop. We will not negotiate. We will not accept surrender. We will make certain that the species responsible becomes a warning whispered in fear for 10,000 years. She paused and looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. The took 47 children. They no longer have a functioning military. Consider carefully what would happen if someone took more. Turned and walked out. Behind her, 47 species sat in stunned silence, understanding for the first time that they had fundamentally misjudged the soft pink creatures from the small blue planet. On the medical ship above Prime, Emma slept peacefully for the first time in 2 weeks. Her parents sat on either side of her bed, holding hands across her sleeping form. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and eternal. And somewhere out there, other species were learning a truth that humanity had always known. There is no force in the universe more dangerous than a parent protecting their child. The galaxy would remember. The galaxy would never forget.